Hi guys, before I jump in how the astrology is going to affect you this month, let's talk about this great conjunction because this is a biggie. This technically happens every 20 years, but this time around, this every quote unquote 20-year event is actually shifting to every 200-year event. So let me just give you kind of like how this really works. What you are looking at is Jupiter and Saturn, the beautiful rings of Saturn and the beautiful diamonds of Jupiter. So one is diamond base, one is gas base, right? So they're like the two furthest visible planets, and when they're meeting, that kind of like starts to indicate a new era of reality. There has been a lot of spin on what this great conjunction will entail. What means conjunction? In astrology, conjunction means when you come very close. Just think about a soulmate, somebody who comes really close to you, who hugs you, who kisses you. So usually we consider conjunction something that is like between two kind of like degrees. In this case, it's like 0.06. It's like tiny as they actually almost overlap. The only difference is that one is much bigger, Jupiter to Saturn, and so it actually depends on a viewpoint. So from the viewpoint of Earth, they're actually lining up, and that's going to be really important to understand here. So it's kind of exciting because what this kind of great conjunction will entail. It's kind of like what also depends on what these planets really mean and how they influence you. Okay, hello. If you're first time here, my name is Kat. I'm a professional mystic and a spiritual life coach, and I dabble in astrology. I'm not a professional astrologer, and I do have my own interpretation. And if you really want me to go into details about it, come on a live chat. I'll explain to you, but not right here because I really want to kind of like go further. All I can say is that I combine traditional Hellenistic astrological techniques, also insights from major religions. That's also some esoteric knowledge that was provided to me through my practice, as well as I combine this with modern psychological counseling. So this is why I also work as a life coach. So you might see me manifesting all this knowledge via tarot, but I might be a little bit more than that. And you're going to find this because this great conjunction is going to happen in the sign of Aquarius, and I'm Aquarius with ascendant Libra. So it's going to really affect me personally. As well, it's going to mostly affect the fixed signs. Fixed signs are the pillars. If you really look into how basically people look at them from the history, from different cultures, from centuries, like they were the pillars of society. Each of them brought some kind of like strength, right? So now this great conjunction is happening in a sign of Aquarius. So let's go ahead and define Jupiter and Saturn as planet. Jupiter is expansion, it's growth, abundance, right? They're calling that the big daddy of the cosmos, but think about it as Santa Claus, right? Santa Claus who carries huge bags of diamonds. And it's kind of like a mission is to spread the wealth here, a little bit here, have it here, right? So expansion can also mean gaining weight. It's kind of like gain. It's a good thing. It's a happy thing, right? A growth. A growth is the fundamental process of life itself. Like we go through these cycles, right? We're going up and down, right? But growth that is unchecked can be cancerous. So that's where this complementary planet of Saturn can come in, because Saturn represents limits and rules. So you need to think of him as the celestial cop and prosecutor. So now we have a Santa sitting on one side of the teeter-totter, and then we have a cop, sitting on the other one. So what can go wrong, right? So Saturn is the furthest visible planet in space, and it represents the cycles of endings, kind of like dying things coming to a close. It's very rigid, right? So is this now rigid kind of boundaries cop checking a jolly dude with bags of diamonds, right? That's kind of like what's happening. But that can be maybe also a very rigid way of looking at it. But what is basically happening, that one is expansion, one is kind of like constrained. So maybe they are kind of like limiting each other down. But let's talk about Saturn first, because Saturn is the quote unquote problematic one. Saturn is the one that brings the biggest growth to people, but some people learn from their own mistakes. Some people learn from other people's mistakes. Most of us learn from our own mistakes, and Saturn, quote unquote, help us that way. So Saturn rules both Capricorn and Aquarius, but there is kind of a difference. Aquarius, so let's go first with Capricorn. Capricorn is like from the top down. So it is like, I'm the government, you do what I say. Kind of like, I set myself here as the president of this company, you'll do my way. There is like not much liberalism or democracy in that kind of like structure, right? So Saturn is about boundaries and kind of like building foundations. On the other hand, Aquarius is like going from the bottom up. So that foundations are done differently. It's kind of like, let's make everybody firm on their feet. Aquarius is kind of like forever young, inquisitive, and active, but it's also a fixed sign. And that's where the Saturnian serious in nature really shows up. You will probably hear, if you're Aquarius, or if you ever inquired about Aquarius, or everything that you heard about Aquarius, that we are a little bit nuts and eccentric and aloof, and that we are like rebellious. And I am not so sure this is true, because that could be some kind of like misattribution of Uranus, when Uranus really doesn't rule Aquarius, and it depends how the planets are positioned. Aquarius is actually much more fixed and steady and serious, and while kind of like being able to keep it light and breezy, right? Many people kind of disregard Aquarius because they think it's kind of like a sign of, oh, the winter is closing and so on and so forth. It's just like too much for me to handle, and that kind of like a stuff, right? But keep in mind that winter is coming, that kind of like tagline from Game of Thrones. That kind of is going to be the opening in a new 200-year era. And it's going to feel like huge seismic shift in order to build foundations of a very different sort. So if we assign Aquarius to this great conjunction, let me show you how this is going to look like. You see how Saturn is smaller, and how you will see them in the sky. Yes, you will be able to see them in the sky. Look at it, 0.06 degrees. So Jupiter is the one and bright, and Saturn is the kind of like darker, etc. And you can see here on the bottom how they're almost like overlapping each other, right? And that's how you're going to be able to see them. And exactly all of these dates right now, you can also kind of like follow them through. You can see how close they already are as we are like speaking right now. So this is kind of like the new reality where we are entering, but I also want to show you this image to make you understand, even though this is our point of view, as you can see, we see Jupiter, the biggie ones, and Saturn kind of like topping it right on top of it, right? Technically, if you're looking at them from here, maybe some other point, they won't be looking that way, but there is like this thing that is really happening over here. So if kind of like we assign Aquarius to this great conjunction, it's going to act like the architect of distilling ideas into something kind of that's very formidable structure, right? And Jupiter and Saturn will be blending two very opposite attitudes of those two energies, right? So now we have a plus, something positive, something that expands, and minus, something that constrains, and they maybe negate each other, they maybe neutralize each other, or they may be simply busy with each other, while Aquarius is going to take the whole freaking reign. So if you're confused, kind of like just think about it, that also sometimes we have two very different people who need to negotiate their way forward. There is a one partner in a marriage that wants all liberty. They want to do whatever they want, while the other one, nope, we're going to have the breakfast at 6 a.m. Are you kidding me? At 6 a.m. I'm not maybe even home at 6 a.m. So they have to find a common language. Aquarius adds the brilliance of merging that ability. Sagittarius also will be another sign that can actually do that, but this time this is happening Aquarius, so let's focus on that, right? So Keep in mind when they're talking about the change of age, Jesus was the one who announced the age of Aquarius and said, "A man will meet you carrying an earth pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he goes in." I believe it was Luke something, right? You can Google it. And guess what? Here we are. Let's follow that like a main picture. So because we are going from earth element to air element with this great conjunction, so it's definitely entrance to a new reality as we are moving from this like 200 year of earth element and everything kind of like that empress and emperor that they elected, their possessions, their pomp and their ceremonies, into air where everything is debatable, kind of everything is intellectual. So this upcoming transit is definitely not destructive or anything like Saturn kind of like might lead you to believe, right? Earlier in the March, it was like a similar conjunction, not as close, and then it caused this global pandemic panic, right? I just want to give you a little bit few dates when we kind of like had this happening. So this time around, it's not going to be like that, just to kind of like put you at peace. It's going to be very neutral. It's going to be very serious. It kind of alarms me a little bit that there is a proximity of Pluto, as Pluto rules viruses and deaths, and Pluto also likes to dabble in psychological games. Haha, plutocracy. Have you heard about the term? So this new age, a new reality, is going to be the age of intellectual air signs that lean more heavily toward the serious rather than free for all, and it kind of like has still a little bit of themes of that totalitarian and surveillance and I know better than you, that kind of like manipulation. I think that some surveillance and constraints will be coming down as a result of Aquarius stepping in. And Aquarius is more like a chaos. Chaos is still organized. It doesn't make much sense, but things are actually working out exactly as they're supposed to be, just like the universe, right? So we might see constraints because it's a fixed sign, but those constraints will be protecting us. For example, we might get some kind of like internet regulations, right? They're like also a little bit of maybe disadvantages of entering an age more air than earth, because it's the cycle of air. So real estate and possessions and all this obsession about trinkets and what money can buy. Look at this, I have a gold ring. Or look at this, look what I have. All of that stuff that almost became normal, that ego driven, that narcissism, possession driven, it's going to really tank. It's going to be, ooh, I don't know you. People will be kind of like trying to erase the history and recreate it, kind of like a thing. The new era is going to have more of a bohemian vibe, and not exactly like it was in a hippie era, but more of people will be thirsty for knowledge and information. See, Aquarius is a fixed sign. It loves order, just like Pluto does. So we might just remove the dictators in power and we might replace them with kind of like something that is shinier, more eloquent dictator, because that's where the danger is. We might have somebody who this time will create some, idiocracy on this entire planet or something like that, right? Because the air signs also consider themselves smart, and unfortunately everything has a good and a bad side, right? Smart can be used really, really well in science, etc., but it can be really used for kind of like negative things. So also keep in mind that Aquarius is a fixed sign. I keep repeating it because that means it loves order, just like Pluto does, right? So hopefully we are not going to see any kind of like turnaround, because I always have to hope that the light wins, that the better wins. But negative is negative. We know that you just need to throw a little bit of dirt in water. It's going to get crappy and muddy and so on and so forth, and then we have to kind of like clean it, right? So keep in mind that we just went through new moon in Scorpio. I was telling you how important this is. It was in the late degrees of Scorpios. It was not anymore that like and jealousy and revenge. It was more in transformation. So it's able to get us into this balance, into kind of like a new system. If you've been through that tunnel, then it's going to be a little bit easier. You can still go back. You can still kind of like decide, I'm going to do the new moon in Scorpio meditation, even though we are out of it, but you are assigning it to yourself. If you don't know how to do it, you cannot Google it anywhere on YouTube, just write to me. I'm going to send it to you for free, some links that I have used, right? So now we've been through that birth, and now we finished with the transforming energy, and this great conjunction is happening at 0 degrees. It's a new baby, it's a new king that has been born. So Aquarius will also be square to Uranus in Taurus. And Taurus is also very much real estate and like-minded things. So it's going to be kind of a shock to the financial system. I think there will be just so many changes to the way in which we deal with finances and how we earn our money and how we use our properties. And this is kind of already turning back into the slavery, kind of like this is normal. We are like in the mushroom part of expansion of the Earth planet. So it's not the best of Earth, that's for sure, right? And we have been experiencing this since 2008, and this is the culmination right now, right? We'll be also going through massive environmental shift, something that actually we have never seen before. So Pluto kind of like forced us in this pandemic to change our ways and change and clear the air like across the planet. Of course, it just cost us pandemic kind of a thing, right? So the fact that this is now moving from 200 years age of Earth into the 200 year of age of air is also called the Great Mutation. It happens every time that these two planets meet, Jupiter and Saturn, but also when they change elements. A conjunction is only when they meet every 20 years, but mutation is also when there's an elemental change. So it's kind of like going to be very intellectual, but also very flexible. I think it will be interesting what happens to the 1% of the 1%ers, right? That the richest people in the world who basically are sitting at home and probably just pulling their little chess figures and telling us what to do. All these dynasties that rule this planet. I don't really think that is going to be the same anymore. So let me know, guys, what 2000 meant for you, because that's usually the closest that we remember, right? You're not as old as I am, so I was like in my mid 20s back then, like I'm in and starting new life and debating with things. But if you remember 2000, the entire air flight industry was messed with Y2K, right? So the greed was at all times high, and it ended in the global recession just a few years later. If you go further down in 1980, when there was another Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, it was in Libra, that disrupted the Earth-Sun cycle, and we have been dealing with the AIDS epidemic, right? So this was also the beginnings of the internet, and now we can look back, oh my gosh, look at how far we came from then, right? But it also was the beginning of very exploitative capitalism like we have never seen before, right? Because it was expanding, it's expanding like way out of the boundaries. We also had recession back then, which was basically a preview what may happen for us to change this like new financial kind of like system dramatically and drastically. It's also going to be changed politically. So I am predicting this is going to finally become meritocracy, and it's going to be way out of plutocracy or monarchy. So thank God and good riddance. It is really, really important this is happening. So how is this going to all affect you and your sign? That's coming next. So thanks for standing by. And if you guys have not so far subscribed, it is kind of like important. So let's now jump